any night you fancy, and I can't think of a better venue and a better host and a better sponsor of this than LBC, who of course provoked the last debate with Nick Clegg and myself.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC. This is Phone Farage.
Here's your chance, take it.
Ukip leader Nigel Farage takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. This is Phone Farage with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Only on LBC.
Good morning. This is Nigel Farage from Phone Farage on LBC, and I'm coming to you live from the historic city of Rochester, where, yes, we've done it again, and a second Ukip MP, in fact, is ready in the House of Commons in Westminster. I'm here for the next 30 minutes taking your calls. This is your chance to put any question you like to me, and I'll do my very best to answer. So the numbers for you to get in touch and to live your questions on air to me are ring me on 0345 6060973. That's 0345 6060973. And we go straight to our first caller, Robin in Herne Hill. Good morning.
Hello, Mr. Farage. I'm down to Rochester to help, but I don't want to be famine at the feast. But I want to know what you're going to do to keep the party after 19 years. I mean, I'm not happy with some of the policies the party is coming out with. I'm not happy about being turned down for being the PPC when this process has been messing me about 5 times in the last 2 years. And I think that most of your PPCs to me seem to be middle class, they seem to earn over £40,000 a year and seem to be on message, and that there's a bit of control freakery and the party going on, which I don't like. And also, your London accounts haven't been cleared for 15 years. I haven't seen them since September 2000. So I wonder what you were going to do to...
Well, this is a very long list of very long list of complaints that I'm sure is interesting about 0.05% of listenership, because you're a Ukip member talking to me about internal Ukip issues. Listen, I would say this to you. Yes, we have now put in place
agenda, which got us into this rash anyway.
Oh dear.
You're talking about workfare. You want to have Ed Miliband on a discussion, which like challenging a crash test dummy, but you don't want to have Natalie Bennett, who had an MP 4 years before we did. I mean, you're interested in fairness, but it seems to me you're only interested in fairness which suits you, not when it's not anybody else.
You can call me Thatcherite if you want to. I mean, others this week have called us too left-wing, so I can't really win on that score. But you asked me a question that will interest people, I think, and that is about Ukip candidates that'll fight the general election next year and their quality. One of the difficulties with new political parties, when they're very, very small, is you ask for people to come forward to stand as candidates. And very often you get people that are not really a very high grade, quite a lot of Walter Mitty's chucked in, and over the 21 years we've been around, grade people standing for us. Now you could of course say that look at the House of Commons, and that's pretty low grade too. We've put in place a pretty rigorous testing system for candidates, but let me assure you one thing. We don't want people, of course, with criminal records or lists of county court judgments against them, or previous memberships of extreme organisations. But your comment that it appears to you that Ukip candidates are all very middle class are the one party, and just look at our 24 MEPs. We've got the biggest social cross-section of this country, far more working-class people standing for Ukip than for any other party. Look at our deputy leader, etc. I think part of the reason that Ukip is doing well, part of the reason that it's connecting, is because actually we do represent the country as a whole.
Mr. Farage, it's Nick Ferrari here, Mr. Farage.
Why you've not been...
Yeah, Mr. Farage, just to offer my good morning to you, sir. Congratulations. I think possibly you've been celebrating late last night, and well-deserved too. I hope not too many pints. But I wonder if I could ask you, why have the London accounts remained unsigned off or unaudited or whatever it was for 15 years?
Because you only have to have audits if you have a turnover over a level. That's the law of the land. That's how it works. If you go actually, most of the expenditure in London is not spent by London as a region. It is spent by the individual constituencies and branches. And the one thing I can assure you is that the Electoral Commission come down on Ukip if they see any irregularity, like a ton of bricks, certainly in a way they don't with the other parties. And we have absolutely squeaky clean with our accounts, because in the past they've given us a very hard time.
All right, just briefly,
Okay,
if I can ask you, just so I can just get a bit of background, Rob, we will move on, but I just want to know, where is it you've tried to be a PPC, and just briefly what are your problems, and then we'll move on to other calls.
If I say Cheek by Jowl, would that give you a hint?
Pardon?
Cheek by Dulwich and West Nord, Ted Giles.
I'm so sorry, Dulwich and West Nord. Okay, and you just feel that you've been blocked because what? They were after someone.
I think because I might be a bit controversial, because, you know, if you're not with the set, I mean,
all right.
Certain candidates have committed certain. I'm not going to go into.
No, indeed, but it was important just to get a little bit of background. Well, hopefully Mr. Farage has answered your question. We go back. Nigel Farage is down in Rochester, of course, and quite right too, celebrating double trouble. He's now caused for the Conservatives. He got his second MP in the House, and we go back to Nigel Farage from Rochester. Mr. Farage, where are we going now?
We are now going to Kyla in Brentford. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Hello.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. So my...
Yes, hello.
Question...
Yep, it's the floor is yours.
My question is that we contacted the party in Surrey, because we're having a question time for our young people who graduated from their National Citizenship Service Programme. Your party, out of all the parties, refused to come down and speak with our young people. We just want to know why you don't want to explain what you could be doing for them.
Well, all I can say is this: the only party in British politics that actually had public meetings, you know, proper public meetings, as opposed to, scripted audiences with preset questions, is Ukip. We have public meetings all over the country. We attract a growing number of people that come along. I always say at the start of the meeting, you know, whether you've come along because you agree with us, whether you've come along because you're open-minded, whether you've come along because you want to absolutely confirm the fact that you hate me, any of those three are fine. You're all welcome. Please listen to us lightly. We will then do our best to answer your questions. So I would say, kind of, we are the most approachable and the most willing political party to engage in debate.
Okay, so why hasn't anyone from your party come down to see us, or want to come down to see us?
Well, have you invited them?
Yes, we have on several occasions.
And have you actually sent them a formal written invitation to one of our elected members? Well, then I would be astonished in that case if somebody was not very keen to come down and see you, albeit if they haven't said yes to you in the last 3 months. I completely understand that, because the entire party machine has been dedicated to events in Clacton, Hayward and Milton, South Yorkshire and here in Rochester. But if you send an invitation personally to me, I guarantee one of our elected representatives will come down and talk to you. All right?
Mr. Farage, you've been quoted in a couple of newspapers this morning saying yesterday that you felt that if there was a victory in Rochester and Strood, and of course there has been, actually it could be more of a danger to the Labour Party than the Conservatives, who you unseated. What lies behind that?
I think we are gaining traction with Labour votes. I think the result, Nick, here in Rochester yesterday proved that, and that was even before Emily Thornbury looked down her nose at White Man on the Cross of St George. I think the Labour Party is in very real trouble with its core vote. I don't think that traditional Labour voters look at the current Labour leadership and even recognise those people to be members of their own tribe. And I think that from here, you know, if Ukip is going to grow in the polls from here, I think it's very likely we'll do so more at the expense of the Labour Party than of the Conservatives.
All right, let's move on, Mr. Farage. Where are we going now?
And not all the pundits do, but they're beginning to understand, I think, that Ukip is a real threat to Labour. Okay, moving on. Our next caller is Kevin. Morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are we doing?
Kevin, hello. Hi.
Nice to meet you. Nigel, I was just wondering, there's an inherent problem with paedophiles within Westminster and Downing Street, which is pretty common knowledge now. What would you do with the people that are involved with the paedophile scandal, and what punishment do you think would be handed out to the MPs that are aware of the disgusting child abuse that has happened in the past? I'd just like to know your stance on it, because
Well, I think we've got to be a little bit careful, Kevin, about what you just said there. It's a well-known fact that paedophiles are in Parliament, and you talked about paedophilia in Downing Street. Let's just be a little bit careful and cautious about that. I've certainly never heard Downing Street linked to any paedophilia myself. However, there are known cases of paedophilia that have existed, going back a few decades through all elements of society, well-known entertainers, people in the rock industry, and certainly in politics too. I don't know the extent of the truth of the allegations that we've seen this week. I mean, we've even had, claims of people being murdered. I just don't know, Kevin, whether that's true or not. I know people see these things and always think there's no smoke without fire. I don't know. But I think it's very important that people are not prejudged. We have to go through a proper process to ascertain whether people are guilty or not. You ask me what punishment I think there should be. Well, I think that's perhaps part of the problem, isn't it? That with sex crimes in particular, what we see are people with a prison system that is absolutely full to bursting. And we see people effectively serve shorter and shorter sentences for a whole variety of sexual crimes. And in many cases, more often than not actually, these people reoffending. So I think the only, to me, logical conclusion to that and means of making society safer, particularly for minors, is we're going to have to build some more prison spaces, and we're going to have to give people longer sentences and actually make them serve them. But let me ask you, Kevin, what do you think we should do?
I think, unfortunately, Nigel Farage, Kevin we lost the line, but let me feed some emails into the conversation and get your reaction on these. First up, Nigel Farage, is Rachel in Bexley, just up the road, actually, from where you are in Rochester. And apologies to the listener, there's a very short time slip between me in London and Nigel Farage celebrating the victory, of course, down in Rochester. So apologies for that, but we will battle through. Rachel in Bexley says, congratulations, I'm pleased you won. What words of comfort do you have for your LBC sparring partner, Nick Clegg, who seems to have had his worst turnout ever for the Lib Dem party? Mr. Farage.
Yeah, the Lib Dems got 349 votes last night. They did manage to beat Monster Raving Loony Party, but that's about the only card that they could possibly draw. I understand that it is in fact the lowest ever score by a major party in this country in any form of national election since the Second World War. So, I mean, this is utter humiliation territory. The Liberal Democrats bombed out in the European elections. They now only have one MEP representing them from across the entire United Kingdom. There's big speculation that the Dems, because they have some good constituency MPs, could possibly hold on to between 50 and 20 seats in Parliament next year. I have to say, Nick, I'm beginning to think that looks extremely unlikely. I think they're going to do far worse than that. I think it's now very likely they'll be down into single figures. And Nick Clegg is paying the price, not for being a bad person, but he's paying the price for going into coalition and for surrendering on one particularly key issue. The Lib Dems, under Charlie Kennedy in particular, had built up a big following amongst students. They pledged to oppose the increase in tuition fees. They broke their word on that, and frankly, I think they've been a busted flush ever since then. I don't think there's anything Nick can do now to rescue the situation between here and May of next year.
Simon in Aston asks, when was the last time you flew the English flag from the front of your house or on a flagpole in your garden?
I haven't got a flagpole in the garden. I'm sorry, perhaps I better put one up, but have I flown across St George out a bedroom window when we're playing football? Of course I have. I'm not ashamed to do it. And I just thought yesterday was the most perfect illustration of the absolute total disconnect between our political class and ordinary people. They sneer, they look down their noses, they're repulsed by nationalism as they see it of any kind, and particularly Englishness. And this is a real problem the Labour Party have got. They hate the idea of the English expressing their identity, and I think Emily Thornberry, frankly, let the cat out of the bag for the way a lot of our arrogant political elite feel about the views of ordinary folk.
Let's move on to other calls, Mr. Farage. Where are we going now?
Yeah, let's do so. We are going to Stuart in Edgware. Good morning, Stuart.
Good morning, Nigel. Congratulations. I'm a total Ukip supporter.
Thank you.
One thing we need to do to get our message across, and people keep saying to me, apart from immigration EU, what do you stand for? What is our policies on health, education, crime, defence, transport, aviation? I don't know. I haven't got a clue. There's some paragraphs in the website, but that's nothing. We need to get a full programme, exactly what our policies are, so people understand exactly what they are.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, Stuart, people do understand that we repeatedly have been opposed to endless foreign military interventions, like the bombing of Libya, which has made the country very much worse. We were fiercely opposed to this government backing the rebels in Syria. Those rebels, incidentally, some of whom morphed into ISIS. I think on education, people do know that we think the grammar school system, unfair that it may be, did actually provide one of the best engines of social mobility. But one of the problems, Stuart, is if we were to produce a full manifesto now, there'd be a problem. You know, one little idea that we came up with about a year ago was that once we start fracking for shale gas, some of the profits of that should be taken off and put into a sovereign wealth fund, very much in the same way that the Norwegians have done with oil. And blame me down if 2 weeks ago the Chancellor of the Exchequer doesn't say, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a sovereign wealth fund to take some of the profits of shale gas? So I'm a little bit nervous about putting out too many specific policies in our manifesto. And I think we should wait until end of March next year, in the run-up to the general election, before we make these things clear. Otherwise, I fear that our fresh thinking, our fresh approach, would actually be copied by the others. After all, everything else we say now on Europe immigration is being copied, at least in rhetorical terms, by the other parties. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, we've got to wait for the whites of their eyes, come out with a big blast, 6 to 8 weeks before the general election, with full, clear, simple, and hopefully quite short manifesto. And I think if we do that and get that right, we might just capture the public's imagination.
Let's move on to the next call, Mr. Farage. Where are we going?
Yeah, OK. We're moving on to Nick in Alderhote. Nick, hello, good morning.
Nigel, good morning, and hearty congratulations to Mark Reckless for his superb victory last night.
Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant, and I have to say, Nick, I think it was a victory for decency, because all through this campaign, what Mark Reckless had to put up with was sniping, abuse, negativity, all sorts of vile things being said about him, and never once did he stoop to their level. Never once did he get into the gutter and try and slag off other candidates. And I think anybody that watches today on YouTube the Reckless acceptance speech from last night will see actually a very dignified, very decent man. So I will pass your congratulations on to Mark Reckless.
I do have a question, though. I am a Ukip supporter. I defected from the Conservatives a couple of years ago, and I will be standing as a Ukip candidate in next year's district council election, the very first time anyone stood for Ukip. However, I did read your interview in the New Statesman last week, where you said you would be prepared to enter sort of discussions about possible coalition, if it came to it, with Ed Miliband and the Labour Party. And I just wondered on what sort of terms you would actually go into coalition with a government and a party that wrecked our economy 5 years ago.
Nick, with respect, you didn't read the New Statesman last week, because if you actually read anything of the party, I didn't even mention it. And so I get asked a question about what happens after next May and what would we not do. And I said I'd do a deal with the devil if I thought that would get us the opportunity to have a referendum. And for doing that, I get attacked for being pro-Miliband. Other newspapers attack me for being pro-Cameron. So best perhaps I just say nothing in future. And let's just fight the general election and let's get a maximum number of UKIP MPs elected. But, Nick, if we do get into the kind of position that I now think is possible after what happened in Rochester Strood last night, and if we do find ourselves holding the balance of power, we would in fact have a responsibility of some kind to speak to whichever is the biggest party. I personally don't think there's a cat's chance in hell of the Conservatives or the Labour Party getting a majority next year. But if we do find ourselves in a position of responsibility, we will have to exercise that. Does that mean we would go into coalition? Again, if you read that New Statesman article carefully, I make it absolutely clear. I do not believe it would be right for UKIP to go into coalition with anybody. We might support a minority government, but I personally do not favour us going into coalition at all. I hope that's really clear for you, for absolutely everybody else that's listening.
It has to be said, Mr. Farage, you've almost been like Mystic Nigel, the way you've called these last two by-elections. You do seem to have nailed it. So if I was to ask you now, which party you see as being the biggest after the next general election, or bigger out of the two of Conservative and Labour, if you are a betting man, Nigel Farage, where'd you put your money?
I haven't got a clue. I think that what's result of Rochester and Strood last night, with UKIP winning what was seat number 271 on our target list. Frankly, all the balls are up in the air. And in terms of making predictions right now for what will happen in the general election on May the 7th next year, you may as well play pin the tail on the donkey. I think it's absolutely impossible to call.
All right, let's move on, Nigel Farage.
Okay.
Where are we going next?
Now we've got a relatively local caller. We've got Steve in Tunbridge. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Nigel. First of all, congratulate you on the victory.
Thank you.
A little comment first, just to say that keep up the good work. I mean, for quite some time, we've been hearing quite snarky comments from others for simply supporting the idea of Englishness for British freedom. But my question was a marriage. None of the political parties seem to be supporting the institution of marriage to strengthen it. So things like no-fault divorce. I was wondering, what is your views on the institution of marriage and how can we strengthen it?
All the evidence is that children that are brought up in a steady home environment have got a better chance in life. That's not to say that people who are brought up in single-parent families can't do phenomenally well. It's just overall the statistics on this are clear. I think that one of the great feelings is that through the tax system and benefit system, there have actually been quite strong disincentives for people to actually live together or be married and live together, and that actually what we've got to do is change the way we tax people, think more heavily about having fully transferable allowances, and if we did that, that would be a much bigger incentive for people to be together and perhaps to stay together. And it is something that I am very keen that we put in our manifesto, which, as I said earlier, will launch middle to the end of March next year. So, that's not a complete answer for you right now, but it is something that I think really matters. And the evidence is, particularly for children brought up in those environments, they have got a better chance and a better opportunity. So watch this space, really, is the answer to that question. All right?
Let's move on, Mr. Farage. Where are we going now, sir?
Yeah, we will. Okay, we're going to Raj in Winchester. Good morning.
Oh, hello. Good morning, Mr. Farage. How are you? Hello?
Very well. I'm okay, Raj. Bit tired.
Fine.
I'm a bit tired, but I'm happy. So go on.
Well, I'm glad you are. I just want to ask a very simple point. I'm minded to say that if UKIP were ever to come into power, I need to remember what Mark Recker said in relation to his view on immigration, and particularly the idea of sending immigrants home. Now, I don't know how he qualified it or not, but I'm asking myself this simple question. I came to this country when I was 10. I'm a hospital consultant. I've got two children who are born in this country, and to all intents and purposes, we are British. We believe this is our home. We've got nowhere else to go. What would UKIP's position, and indeed your personal position, be with regards to people like myself who have settled here? I'm just worried that is this thin end of a wedge, starting with Europeans, Eastern Europeans, and then generalising it to anybody.
Yeah, no, Raj, thank you for that. Look, what happened the other day was in a long hustings, a rather complicated question was asked, led to a debate about transitional arrangements between the time that Britain announces she'll leave the EU and when she actually does. And would there be reprisals from Spain and France and all the rest of it? And Mark got into a position where perhaps he said something slightly clumsy, which of course was taken out of context and blown up out of proportion. I recommend, Raj, you listen or you watch Mark Reckless's speech that he gave, his victory speech last night, which, as I've said already on this programme, was a very calm and dignified speech where he makes it absolutely clear. I can give you, Raj, UKIP's views on immigration policy very quickly. Number one, anybody that has legally come to this country is, of course, absolutely, fully entitled and welcome to be here and to stay. Number two, anybody that has come to this country illegally is not welcome to stay here, because unless we act on illegal immigration, we send a message out to the rest of the world that anybody can come. And thirdly, once we're free from the European Union and we have the ability to control our own borders, we'll be very happy for people from Southern and Eastern Europe to come to Britain to work on time-specified work permits, to come and do jobs, but without automatic rights to qualify for in-work benefits on day one. I hope that settles absolutely clearly any of the nonsense that we've heard over the course of the last couple of days. And I hope you too, Raj, are satisfied with our position on that.
Let's move to another story. This is a question from me, Mr. Farage. Critics of the government's spending on foreign aid were dismissed as Little England by the Lib Dems yesterday. Ed Davey praising Britain's £720 million pledge to a new UN fund to tackle climate change. This, of course, moves towards £12 billion, the budget for foreign aid. And Mr. Davey talking about how we should be proud, how we should urge other countries to be equally ambitious, and there will be no yielding. What's UKIP's policy there?
Well, not only are we saying to hell with the Somerset levels, and the whole of the east coast of England, which, if you remember, on a big storm surge last year was nearly in very, very big trouble indeed. So we've decided that we're going to spend money on flood defences in Bangladesh rather than doing it in our own country, which strikes me, given what happened last winter, to be the wrong thing to do. But secondly, we're spending hundreds of millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money encouraging third world countries to have expensive energy. We're encouraging them to have wind energy, things like that actually boost the cost of energy. If we really want to help the third world, one of the things we might do is to help them have cheap energy, because it's through cheap energy they can actually get their economies moving and give themselves a chance of getting manufacturing industry going. So I think on both counts, what Ed Davey is doing and what this government doing is wrong, doesn't have public support. I believe completely the wrong thing to do.
Let's move to another call running up to the last couple of minutes. Mr. Farage, where are we going?
Yes, we are. We're going to Bristol and we're speaking to Sam.
Morning, Nigel. Just wondering how many of the things you promised at this by-election you're actually going to be able to stick to. You said at the Eastleigh by-election last year that UKIP would bring a flat tax, but your position has changed, hasn't it?
Have you read the Eastleigh literature?
I've read
It's
some of it,
interesting, isn't it? People say what we stood for and what we promised. At no point anywhere on the literature in Eastleigh did we talk about a wholesale flat tax system. What we talked about in Eastleigh were flatter, simpler taxes, and our belief, a campaign that we've now had for many years, that there should be no tax on the minimum wage. So our biggest campaign on taxation is for no tax on minimum wage, and to shift up the levels at which people start paying 40p, which of course was top rate tax for many, many years in this country, and which now brings within it, experienced nurses and police officers and people like that. So flatter, simpler taxes, but with the big emphasis of getting below paid out of tax. And that is what we said, Sam, at Eastleigh, and it's exactly what Mark Reckless said here in Rochester too, and I think we've been absolutely consistent on that point. Yes, there are some within our party who are campaigning for a wholesale flat tax system, and as with any political party, you get different wings of a party arguing for different policies, but I think, we set out pretty clearly where we stand on tax, and that's exactly where we're going to stay. And by the way, there is one big tax increase I do want. I think the idea that people from outside the EU can come to Britain, and I'm thinking particularly about billionaires from Russia or from the Middle East, and they can go down and shop at all the most expensive jewellers and Harrods and wherever you like. And when they get to Heathrow Airport, they get a refund on the 20% VAT they've paid. I'd like to end that. So that's one tax increase that I would like to put in place.
Just before I let you go, Mr Farage, as we reach the end of our time, Michael Gove has reassured the Conservative Party that he's confident there will be no more defections to UKIP prior to the general election, at least. How much confidence should the Conservatives take from that?
Michael Gove said he was 100% certain there would be no more defections from Conservative MPs to UKIP. And I used to think Michael Gove was an intelligent man, but I think that was a very intelligent thing to say. There are not going to be defectors this week or next week. There'll be considerable sucking of teeth and people thinking and working out what they should do. I would say this to Mr Gove. I personally would be very surprised if there were defections between now and the next general election.
Labour defections too, Mr Farage?
Well, I hope so, and we have been talking to some Labour backbenchers, and one or two of them are slightly fearful that if they come to UKIP, what will reprisals be against them, the ostracisation within their local communities. But there are a growing number of people in the Labour Party genuinely worried about the European question, the impact it's having on ordinary families, and about the fact the Labour leadership just clearly don't even seem to comprehend the importance of this issue. I'd love to welcome Labour defectors too, of course I would. At the moment, what's happened is two men, Carswell and Reckless, haven't just joined UKIP, but they've had the guts to do something we haven't seen for decades in British politics. They've put their necks on the line. They've offered themselves to the public, in by-elections, so the public can choose to back them or sack them, and in both cases the public have backed them. And I think it's a victory for honesty and decency in British politics.
Lastly, a slightly personal question. At Clacton, many of my listeners and I were hugely impressed by your indefatigable stamina. You've been celebrating, I was going to say late into the night, I think early into the morning. There you were with boots blacked and in position, ready to go to join LBC. Can I ask you, Mr Farage, did you have another lock-in last night? If so, until what time, and how are you going to do a hair of the dog this morning?
Well, I mean, the count didn't finish until some ridiculous time. But listen, Nick, I prepared well for today's phone, Farage. I had a full 42 minutes in bed, which I don't think too bad. I hope I've managed to deceive everybody that I've had a bit more sleep. But there you are. That's what happens. By-elections are tremendously exciting. And I'm here doing this. Mr Reckless is, as we speak, being sworn in the House of Commons. I'll speak in the NHS debate today. And I do intend, actually, once all the media's over this morning, I am going to go for lunch somewhere. Absolutely.
Watch out for those kitchen sinks flying around Rochester. Nigel Farage, leader of UKIP, appearing here on LBC, where news is next.
Nigel Farage has ruled out UKIP entering into a coalition government with either Labour or the Conservatives after next year's general election. It follows his party winning its second seat in Parliament.
I make it absolutely clear, I do not believe it would be right for UKIP to go in coalition with anybody. We might support a minority government, but I personally